All right, we're going to get started. Thanks everyone for joining us this morning or this afternoon, depending on when you're dialing in from. The title of this webinar was originally prepping for a downturn, and our team took a look at it a couple of days ago, and we thought that was a little too dour, so we did a rethink, and we're now calling this webinar prepping for the work from home era, and intro to utilization for CFOs. So we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Adam Sewell. I'm head of sales and marketing here, and I'm joined by our own CFO, head of finance, Ian Sims. Ian, you want to go ahead and say hi?
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thanks for being here.
Now, as I'd imagine, many of you are kind of dealing with the emerging crisis around COVID, and there's been a lot of new things to deal with and new challenges to manage. Ian and I are actually both dialing in from our home. Denton's announced work from home policy about a week and a half ago, last Monday. And so that's one of the things that we're managing currently. And it's kind of through line for some of the material we'll be on today. So the agenda is pretty straightforward. We're going to have a chat about some of the challenges and things that CFOs and finance leaders are thinking through. We'll provide some background into Density's technology. We'll hop into a product demo, and then we'll have some Q&A at the end of the webinar. So if you do have questions, please feel free to enter them. You'll see a little Q&A box there at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Just enter them there, and we'll get to them there at the Q&A section at the end. So thanks again for joining, especially amid such an unusual and challenging time. So the mind of a CFO. Ian, I thought it'd be fun. I put some charts together. I thought I could just run you through these charts, and it could help frame the conversation, and also might challenge you to think, see if you can guess what some of these charts are, I guess. So trend one, what's your guess on what this chart is?
Woo. An inflation adjustment for some random basket of goods over 5 years?
That's a pretty good bet. It's kind of like the Economist's Big Mac Index, maybe, but no. This is actually so. This is Class A and Class B corporate real estate trends up through the end of 2018. Across metros, we've seen continual increases in cost per square foot across the country. Obviously, a lot of the recent trends bring a lot of that into question, and to see what's going to happen in the coming months and years. But corporate real estate is a very valuable asset, and it costs a lot to not only lease or purchase, but also to operate, right? All right, so trend two. Ian, what's this?
Let me do a little bit better on this one. All right, so this is clearly 5 days a week, and what I'm guessing, this is probably like office attendance over the last month and a half. And if I'm guessing right, the last one is starting to show wherever this was, a work from home policy was probably implemented right around March 16th, and the week before you started to see a lot of people stop coming to the office.
Ding, 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 ding. You actually got that one right, which so congratulations. You don't win anything, but you did pick the trend. So this is a screenshot from Density Software. It's showing one of the buildings in our portfolio. You can see kind of mid last week, before this particular company announced a work from home policy, people started self-selecting that to work from home. And then this week, you can see it's very, 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 very quiet at the office. So the work from home policy is clearly having a negative impact on people coming to the office. Okay, and we got one more trend for you, Ian. What is behind door number 3?
Yeah, this is probably the interest in work from home, and probably how often Google searches are being hit with that particular query.
Yeah, you nailed that one. So if you look at overall interest in work from home as a concept, if you look at some of the share prices of Zoom technologies and other work from home players, there's a huge spike in interest where companies are having to rethink their entire policy set in a very short period of time in an effort to maintain the operation of their business. Now, not all companies are able to do this, but those that can are obviously looking into these types of policies and figuring out what it means for their business, short term and long term. So that's kind of the context of all of the things that are going on. Obviously, there are things that are having a very near-term and acute impact and challenge set. And then, it's still very unclear of how all of this will shake out. But Ian, I just wanted to get your take as a finance leader. We've talked about, yeah, maybe this work from home thing is just going to be a blip, or regardless of how this shakes out, perhaps work from home will be a more permanent part of companies' toolkits in terms of how they actually operate their business. Wanted to put that in front of you and see if you had any thoughts or opinions on where we're headed.
Yeah, I think like a lot of finance people, we're pretty conservative by nature, and whether or not it's a blip or something that's more extended, we're probably going to tend towards assuming it's more of an extended thing. And so that's definitely on our minds and kind of how to react to that. More than anything, right now, we're all trying to look, okay, how how do we, reduce our OpEx wherever possible and just, keep our financials in greatest shape as possible during a period of great uncertainty. And, I guess as it relates to this, clearly after people, we're obviously seeing some companies start to do layoffs, and we saw reports this morning that unemployment claims have shot up dramatically in the last few days. But beyond people, for a lot of companies, real estate is one of their biggest expenses, whether that's building ownership and maintenance or just a lease. If people aren't working in the office, you have a large non-performing asset, and you want to start doing something about that.
What can you do?
Well, a number of things. So, if you're in a lease situation, you'll obviously want to talk to maybe your landlord about renegotiating, restructuring your lease, maybe for a lower rent, but extending the terms so that everyone's got a fair shake. Certainly, no one wants to lose their tenants, so there probably is more and will be more increasing willingness to work with you on that. If that's not an option, you may start to you just really need to know how your space is being used. If there's clearly no people in there, and if you have unused section of your office, those are ripe for subleasing perhaps. And maybe what you're trying to do is basically, if you're stuck with real estate, you want to increase your return on it. There's something you can get out of, then by all means you would. And maybe that means not renewing your next lease. Maybe that means starting to look at office space consolidation across properties. But whatever it is, you really have to think about optimizing your portfolio.
Yeah, I think that's part of the discussion that you and I had prior to this webinar. There's kind of the mid to long term play, which is over the long term, if work from home really becomes a thing, or God forbid we have to make cuts to our head count, how do we retool that portfolio to better match the actual number of people in the space? And that's one of the through lines in terms of why we founded Density, was to provide a data set that allows companies to actually do that. And then I'll just share kind of a more near-term thing that actually just got an email a couple days ago from a Fortune 500 client of ours. Has a number of buildings in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. They have implemented a work from home policy. They still have essential staff that are deemed to be essential to the operation of the building, who come on site. They have Density installed at their building and floors. And this particular client shared with us that they're able to now, with Density, not clean the floors that are not visited. So rather than cleaning space that has not been visited by a human, they're able to just very quickly in their dashboard understand which spaces have not been visited and not pay for that service. In this particular case, the client shared that they're saving now $26,000 a month on cleaning expenses. And so that's just one very near-term way to unlock operating OpEx savings. But then, of course, over time, there's going to be larger and bigger initiatives that you can do to reduce your cost profile. I guess I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but I have one more question for you if you don't.
Well, no, actually, I mean, I guess the one thing I would add is that, that's an interesting point. It kind of makes me think like, a lot of people I'm talking to, both customers and vendors of ours, is, we're all working from home right now. And what everyone seems to be saying is like, I kind of like it. Like, yeah, I miss the people I used to sit side by side with, but I'm way more productive. And I'm not getting pulled into so many just side conversations, and, meetings are on schedule, they end on time. And I'm just able to kind of keep my head down and work more efficiently. And so like, if companies start to realize that as a benefit, I think the whole like idea of rationalizing people come into the office every day may become a trend. in which case, then you would start to think, oh, or maybe the purpose of my office has taken on new meaning, and maybe not everyone needs a dedicated desk. Maybe we move a lot more towards hot desking and hoteling.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we consolidate our conference rooms just because we simply don't need so much physical space on a day-to-day basis anymore because we do work effectively remotely.
Yeah, so I mean that's a great point, and it's also, as we've talked to workplace teams across the country, many of the forward-thinking ones have been already, experimenting with many of these things. And so if work from home does become a thing, a lot of these teams have already experimented with some of the tools and tactics that examples like WeWork have deployed to densify the workplace without creating a bad experience for the employees. So Ian, it sounds like that's one of the preconditions for if work from home is going to become a broader thing is employees are demonstrably productive at home. Are there any other preconditions you think would have to be in place for like work from home to be less of a blip and more of like a more permanent feature?
Um, well, I don't know. I think obviously the extension of kind of shelter in place would maybe make that just more of a norm, and maybe we just become more accustomed to it. I can say that beyond just having space for people in offices, the having people in offices is it's and just the space to house them is more than just the desk and the rent per square foot. I mean, like, you're not providing as many. If you offer snacks and meals to your employees, well, you don't need to do that so much anymore, and you don't need to pay for HVAC so much everywhere and lighting and whatnot. You mentioned cleaning already, and there's so many things when you start to think about all the costs with having people in a building. Um, you know, if we are forced to tighten down because revenues recede, these it just follows that I'm looking to lower every cost I can, and there's so much tied to this. So I may start to encourage my people to work from home more, just because I'm realizing real savings from it.
Okay. Any other thoughts before we move on?
No, not yet. I'll continue to listen in here.
Okay, great. We'll
What?
cruise.
I did have one. I apologize. Sorry, I
You
was.
go for it.
Yeah. I was just thinking of my time. I used to work at Intel a while ago, and we obviously, tens of thousands, if not over 100,000 employees there, and there was, we were just basically a series of giant cube farms, and there were large swaths of different floors that were just empty cubes because no department laid claim to those desks. They were just kept because, well, maybe the marketing department's going to grow, or maybe the chipset department's going to move over here, and because the space was just sort of unclaimed, no one really paid attention to it. And for a company that that has that going on, while at the same time is also like expanding their real estate portfolio around the world, like, it wasn't done efficiently. And so there's probably, even at the time, there was probably a huge savings to be realized that just wasn't. And it just kind of spoke to the fact that there's probably a lot of dark and unnoticed real estate out there in an office that should be addressed.
Well, it's interesting you say that. It's a good transition for the next section that we'll touch on briefly. But I would just add, when in a bull market, when there's lots of growth and companies are doing well, those issues don't really matter, right? Who cares if we have extra square footage allocated per employee, or who cares if we actually don't know? We can't measure it. We're profitable and we're doing well as a business. Looked at through a bear market lens, that becomes a huge problem, right? It's one of the first things you likely would look to in terms of improving the overall operating posture of your business. So transitioning, we believe that physical space is the most valuable asset class that people invest in without measuring its performance. Meaning there is no data set that shows how your top two or three expense items, namely your people and your real estate, interact, right? And CBRE, who's a partner of ours, a very close partner of ours, has estimated that about $150 billion is spent on space that's either underutilized or not used at all. So that's 41% of leased or owned corporate office space. So that's a huge a huge potential savings if you're able to use space more efficiently. Now, the technologies that exist, alternative technologies that are used to count people, are either highly inaccurate, invasive, meaning they capture personally identifiable information, or they're both. Density's technology, and we'll just touch really briefly on how our technology works now. What density does is we accurately and anonymously count people in buildings and spaces and floors all across the world, and we serve that data up in a purpose-built software platform or an API that gives financial leaders and other business decision makers data on how these two giant assets interact, and helps you identify opportunities to either repurpose, consolidate, or otherwise improve the performance of your real estate. Really, our focus here at Density, we're really focused on helping companies improve the cost efficiency, security, and overall occupant experience of our customers' buildings and real estate. We've been around since 2014. Over that time period, we've started, started in our founder's apartment, and now we're fast forward, 6 years. We're working with some of the largest names in corporate real estate across a number of different verticals. Ian and I are both calling you today from our homes in the Bay Area. We do have a San Francisco headquarters. We have a New York City location, and we manufacture our sensor technology, which we're going to touch on now, in our factory in Syracuse, New York, where that picture was taken. So here's the sensor that powers our data platform. You heard me mention privacy. This is not a camera. There are some low-cost camera options on the market where people are effectively hanging cameras above desks and taking pictures of where people are and using that data to make some inference in terms of what's going on in those spaces. Density from day one has really been focused on ensuring that we do not invade the privacy of our occupants or open our corporate clients up to risk of being hacked or losing IP through a malicious act. And what this sensor does is it goes above a doorway or a threat, and it anonymously and accurately counts humans coming into and exiting space in real time, and again serves that data up in a software that you can use intuitively. Here's what the sensor looks like deployed. Here we have Dave from our team doing some work. Looks like an empty office here. You can see the sensor above the doorway there. And won't go into too much depth here, but the main talking point is, again, it's not a camera. We're using depth. You can kind of think of it as a 3D render on the list. That's the visualization of the data that the sensor is capturing. And then we have a set of algorithms that reside on the unit. It's processing that data in real time and just serving +1, -1, and some timestamp information in the cloud, where our cloud service aggregates it all and makes sense of it across buildings, floors, multifunction spaces, mini kitchens, and other types of spaces in your portfolio. Working with some of the best names in every vertical here across a number of different industries. Again, helping real estate and finance teams make sense of their corporate real estate portfolio to improve occupant experience and cost savings. So with that, I'll hop into a quick demo here and just show you a little bit of our platform. So this is Dash. I've already logged in here. This is the demo instance. I've clicked on Spaces, and I'll just touch on a few things here. So Spaces are really within Density. It's how the Density universe exists. So you can see here we've got a number of different locations. We got Albuquerque, Dallas, New York City, San Francisco. So this is probably a 4 or 5 building campus here. I've gone ahead and clicked into a single location within Dallas. And I'm just going to look at Market Street first floor and talk you through some of what this data means. So you can see we've set target capacity for this floor. So this is kind of what we believe to be the right number of people to be on this floor. Fewer than that would be leaving money on the table. Essentially, we wouldn't be making full use of that asset. And higher than that 80, that target capacity would feel too busy and too crowded. Now we can also have a legal capacity. So from a fire code perspective, this floor cannot go over 100 people, and we can talk about why that's important, perhaps in a separate thread here. So I'll just quickly go through some of this data, and then I'll show you a couple of additional things. If you do have questions, reminder to please enter them there in your Q&A, and we'll get to them at the end here. So I've gone in here, clicked on the first floor. You can just see really quickly, this is visits. So this is entrances onto this floor. You can see down here, that seems to be mimicking some other things that we've seen. You've got live events here. So this is live data. And when we say live, we mean right now. This right scale here is 700 milliseconds ago. This left scale is a minute ago. The blue dots are entrances and the green dots down here are exits. You can see right now that there's 74 people on this floor. It means it's 93% full. And again, this is a demo instance, so it's not real data. But if you were logged into your density account, you would see exactly how many people are on this floor right now. So this 74 is 93% of this target capacity of 80, if that makes sense. You can see where we're trending throughout the day. You can see that there's a natural uptick in the beginning part of the day. People typically leave for lunch, between 11 and 12, and so you can start to see that occupancy come down. Here's that entrance data by hour, so you can segment the data to understand different trends within a day, within a week, or across several quarters, or even across several years. And then the last thing I'll just note before we dive into the actual cost savings portion of the presentation is occupancy. And so interestingly, we're seeing many of our customers start to use some of the occupancy tracking in real time to help not only monitor, but also potentially enforce their work from home policies and ensure that they're not crowding employees or other people into a space that otherwise should be vacated due to the current COVID crisis. So this is peak occupancy, and what this is in density is when the space was its busiest, how many people were in the space. And so you can see here that this floor had a pretty chronic overcapacity problem. We put a policy, in this scenario, a policy was put in place to try to mitigate that issue. And you can see that the peak occupancy did come down, but we're still pretty regularly over this legal capacity. And so again, from a policy standpoint, from a people and workplace standpoint, there's probably additional things, and a facility standpoint, there's additional things we should put in play here. If you did want to get alerted if a space was going over capacity, policies now are saying that no more than 10 people should be congregated. You could very easily create text alerts and say, notify me when there are more than 10 people in this space. Simple as that. So that's a little bit of orientation in terms of how the data set works. And I did want to just share one more thing before we took it back to some questions and asked people how this might be applicable in their settings. So I've clicked over here on analytics and loaded a report here. This is that same set of spaces that we were just looking at. And this is analytics can be thought of as kind of the place where you would come to compare different spaces across your portfolio. You're very easily able to slice and dice the data, create custom reports that enable you to understand how your spaces are performing. So you can see I've selected 5 different spaces here in a time segment. So March 3rd to the 12th. I'm looking at hourly data. And here's some of the things that we're looking at. We're looking at occupancy. So this is the number of people in these different spaces. You can see that the Albuquerque HQ has the most people coming in on a regular basis, followed by North Market, then Pacific Avenue, and then, although this does change throughout the day, as you can see. So you can see across these spaces, we have capacity for 1,820 people. You can see across the 4 buildings in this portfolio selection, the peak occupancy never reaches 1,820. So at the 4 building level, we're not going over peak occupancy, and on average throughout a given day, we're hitting about 391. Now that's all fine and dandy, but what we really want to focus on is how these individual buildings are performing. So you can see the HQ, the peak occupancy is only 873, whereas North Market and Hanover Square are regularly coming over that legal capacity that we've set. So the concept of utilization is essentially occupancy divided into that capacity. And so this is where you're able to come in and actually understand overall, how is your space being utilized? And this is at the building level. We can go even further and look at floors and even individual rooms to identify space that's being underutilized. So let's just go through a couple examples here. So you can see North Pacific Avenue at peak never got over 72% utilized, meaning this is a building that there might be some square footage that we could go in and potentially harvest or repurpose, or we could allocate more staff here over the long term. to ensure that we're making full usage of this square footage. On average, the space is only being utilized about a third of its capacity or full potential. Similar with Albuquerque, right? So peak utilization is only 63% over this time series, and the average is only 27%. This is a clear opportunity for us to unlock some savings from an operating perspective, whether that means not cleaning the space that's not being used, or heating or otherwise servicing the space, or potentially repurposing the space, consolidating space, or adding more headcount. So then we'll click on this available capacity, which is a feature that we just released in beta a couple weeks ago. So what this is this is helping you understand as a financial leader what all of this means in terms of dollars and cents. So what you're able to do here is allocate a cost per person or cost per desk that translates that available capacity into a dollar savings, or what we've heard termed as a harvestable savings or improvement in performance. So you can see here, this Albuquerque office, this headquarters, again, peak utilization of this time series is 63%. On average, that's only 27, which means that at peak, if we were to allocate more people to this location or otherwise get rid of the space that's not being utilized, we would unlock $158,000 in monthly operating expenses based on this $300 per person frame. Now, we can also calculate this on a cost per square foot or other basis, but this is just giving you a sense of what this data means in terms of operating OPEX savings or other opportunities to reduce cost. Now, on average, it's only a third utilized. If you were to take that same capacity on average and multiply it by the cost per head, you're sitting on $328,000 of potential savings or value that you could otherwise unlock. Now, I always stop here and say, this data is designed to help inform your decision. We're not saying, hey, go stuff another 527 people into this location immediately. All it's saying is that you're able to compare using standard metrics across your portfolio how your different spaces are used, so that you can guide the right decision towards unlocking both near-term savings in terms of cleaning the operations, as well as mid and long-term savings in terms of rebalancing your portfolio and right-sizing your space. So I know that was a lot, so I'm gonna go back to the presentation here. We can take some questions. Ian, I don't know if you have anything to add or any thoughts, but thought I'd give you a chance to chime in.
No, thank you. I mean, all that data on utilization would kind of help me tremendously in making all the decisions we were talking about earlier. So I definitely see the value, but obviously I'm biased. So I know that a few questions came in, so let's go to those.
All right. Yeah, so if you want to order a few to install now while my offices are less busy, how long will shipping take? This looks like this person's based in Texas. If orders are received by 2 p.m., we can typically get it out. 2 p.m. Eastern, we can typically get it out same day. This week, however, we are shipping on Mondays and Fridays, given some of the challenges around COVID and logistics. But we have plenty of inventory. We can ship out orders if you want to get started. We are actually seeing, there's some variance in terms of how companies are handling this, but some companies are looking at an empty office as an opportunity to come in and do some maintenance and other types of installs. So we can get you started almost immediately if that's what you'd like to do. Ian, this is probably a good question for you. What kind of infrastructure has Density found is instrumental for successful work from home, like technology, process, et cetera?
Yeah, no, we're very well established as a Slack company, so we do tons of communicating on Slack, and the advantages of obviously there's text and file transfer and the ability to make phone calls with screen sharing. We're also heavy users of Google Hangouts and Zoom. And then, for us, like a lot of, I guess, startups and smaller companies, we're very much embedded in the Google app suite. So all of those obviously are designed around collaboration. So we use them extensively. And I think between just all those tools and just the good old standard phone, we're able to see each other and interact throughout the day.
Yeah, and I know. I think we did this. We put this daily recurring 30-minute section on everyone's calendar called remote, and literally it's just for people to come in and say hi, and people might be doing some work or chatting, but that seems to be giving. I don't know. I've really enjoyed the several that I've joined in terms of just feeling connected to the business. Obviously, we have a relatively small team compared to companies with tens of thousands of people, but I think it is important to make sure you still stay connected to your team beyond just productivity, right? It's good to keep those relationships strong and healthy.
Yeah, no, I mean, I do miss, seeing people day to day that I used to sit next to and whatnot. So I am trying to like just have like a live conversation with people from time to time and really just pick up the phone and say, hey, how are things going? And then just talk about issues versus just kind of type them out over Slack. So so far so good. I think we're all feeling pretty connected, and those daily kind of remote open water cooler sessions have been awesome.
I guess on a related question, as a financial leader, what additional investments would you see you need to make if work from home is going to be a thing long term?
Yeah, I think just to be effective, obviously all of the remote tools we just discussed, and then just making sure that people are able to, connect effectively. And so, you know, maybe instead of like paying for as high speed capacity internet in the office, maybe we'll begin to obviously transfer that to our employees, and just making sure that everyone has a very stable and robust connection at home so they can be connected. That's the obvious one. We're obviously all laptops, which helps. Just so long as everyone has the tools they need to be effective, and connect reliably, I think we're in pretty good shape. The great thing is it's not that heavy an investment realistically. As soon as everyone has a desk and a monitor and a computer, they're ready to go.
Great. I have another question from Mark. How does this technology work in emergency situations? How are you able to identify where people are in real time in a crisis? That's a great question. So we will, accuracy is a core differentiator of our technology. So in good install conditions, our sensor detects anywhere from 96 to 99, in some cases 100% of all entrances and exits. We are very transparent about how accurate our device is. In fact, every device that comes online, we issue an accuracy audit of that individual device. And so you're going to be able to understand exactly how accurate it is. We do see people starting to deploy this for things like employee mustering and other types of use cases where, if you're responding to a threat or there's an emergency, you want to know where people are in your building. In the spirit of being fully transparent about our accuracy. So let's say a sensor is 99% accurate. If you had 1,000 people come in and out of that space throughout a day, even at 99%, you still may see 10 people in there when there's not 10 people. And so, provided that the end use case is comfortable with that type of data level of accuracy, then absolutely people are deploying this to understand where people are in a building. But if you need 100%, I need to know exactly if there's one person or two people in this one particular room, and it's kind of life or death, then we would likely guide you away from that use case. We have spoken with many emergency first responders and former members of SWAT teams, in fact, and shown people the data set. And the response has been, in the threat response scenario, just knowing where 90% of the people are is incredibly helpful. So in the case of the unfortunate cases of school shootings and school violence, knowing that 90% of the people are in the cafeteria helps them craft a response, because every single minute really, really matters in terms of responding to those types of scenarios. So totally separate use case, but we do see a lot of safety and security applications of the technology that are coming to the fore. All right, with that, I think we're at the end of the questions, and we are over the half an hour, so appreciate everyone sticking with us to the end. Again, my name is Adam and Ian. Our emails are there. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to either one of us, and stay safe, and we look forward to talking to you soon.